One of the challenges in many relationships is not simply hearing what our partner is saying, but actually understanding and internalizing the messages they're trying to communicate. And one of the things many people desire in a relationship is to genuinely feel seen, understood, and heard. There are a number of things that can prevent that from happening effectively. A pastor friend of mine told my wife and I a number of years ago that one of the biggest misunderstandings about communication is that it has happened. And while that is a little bit tongue in cheek, it's also incredibly valid and relevant and true more often than not. One of the tools that people often discuss and bring up when it comes to communication is the idea of active listening. And active listening is simply when you listen to what the other person is saying, and then you repeat back to them the message that you heard or understood. Um, you might use something like, "What I'm hearing you say is blah, 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 blah. Does that sound right?" And then the initial communicator gets to say, "Yes, that's exactly it," or "Not quite," and then try again. And it can be really helpful to do that. There's also a few things that can make that tricky or that can make it ineffective. One thing that would happen to me sometimes is my wife and I would sit down to talk, and I'm all amped up and geared in to be checked in and to listen and to actively listen. And she would start talking, and maybe 10 minutes later, she would pause, and now it's my turn to reflect back what I heard. But it was 10 minutes, and my brain is now on overload. Maybe I got distracted 5 minutes in, or who knows what else. And it was very overwhelming for me, and then it was also disappointing for her when I wasn't able to effectively listen to what she was trying to communicate. So then we learned that when you're doing this, it's best to go no more than 2 to 3 minutes and then try to actively listen on that, because most people can't reflect back, paraphrase, or summarize more than about 2.5 minutes worth of material. So here's an active listening activity that you can do to practice listening and to practice moving your listening simply from hearing to understanding. So you sit down with your partner with a timer of some sort. Most cell phones at this point have a stopwatch or a timer feature. You could even use a traditional wind-up egg timer, something like that. So you sit down together, you set the timer for 2.5 minutes, and one person goes first. They have 2.5 minutes to talk about whatever's on their mind, whatever they want to say, and they just go. And the other partner does not interrupt at all. You don't interrupt, you don't interject, you just focus on listening and trying to understand and capture the message the person is trying to communicate. So you listen for 2.5 minutes, the timer goes off, and you're done, right? It's not, well, wait, let me finish that thought. It's no, the timer went off, now we're done, we're moving into step two. So step two is the listening partner then actively listens. You engage in that practice of paraphrasing, summarizing. Again, essentially it's, okay, what I'm hearing you say is, and then you try to repeat the core message or the main points of what your partner tried to communicate initially. After that, after you actively listen, now it's your partner's turn again and they provide feedback, immediate feedback. And that looks like, yes, that's exactly what I meant. That is exactly what I was trying to say. Or, not quite. What I meant was, and then you re-clarify. And at this point, you don't necessarily use the timer. You just go back and forth. Now, if you find that your conversations end up dragging way out, and after that initial 2.5 minutes, each subsequent step is now taking 5 minutes or 6 minutes or 7 minutes, it would be really helpful to slow it back down and go back to the literal timer of 2.5 minutes to talk, 2.5 minutes to actively listen, 2.5 minutes for feedback and correction, 2.5 minutes to practice actively listening again, something like that. But the whole idea is one person gets 2.5 minutes to talk, the other person actively listens, you engage in that feedback process, and then once you get to the point where the initial communicator says, yes, that's exactly what I meant, now it's the other person's turn. So if my wife got to go first, she talks for 2.5 minutes. We actively listen. She provides feedback until we get to the point of, yes, that's exactly what I meant. And now it's my turn. So we reset the timer. I have 2.5 minutes to say whatever's on my mind, whatever I need to say. At the end of the timer, or at the end of my thought, if I don't have 2.5 minutes worth of material, we engage the listening part again. So now she comes at it and says, okay, what I'm hearing you say is, fill in the blank, and we work through that until it's to the point where it's like, yes, that's exactly what I meant. So sit down with your partner, try this, have a timer. Feel free to take notes if you need to, especially early on while you're trying to get a hang of this process, so to really hearing and understanding the main points, and then to also be able to articulate back to your partner, what I'm hearing you say is this. Especially early on, it can be very helpful to have that structure and to stick very closely to that structure. And then as you go, as it becomes more natural, you can remove the structure, maybe you even remove the timer, and it just flows more smoothly. But start with the timer, start with a structure, set up this conversation ahead of time when everything is relatively calm, preferably, so that you're coming at this with both partners being in a pretty regulated state. So give it a shot. Feel free to post feedback in the comments, and good luck.